Hello and welcome to Global Lens. Over the next 30 minutes, we put the spotlight on all the top stories from around the world. I'm Parikshit Luthra. These are top global stories we're tracking. US and Europe agree on a trade deal with days to go for the August deadline. US will impose a 15% tariff instead of the 30% proposed earlier. Auto tariffs reduced from 25% to 15%. Steel tariffs to continue at 50%. India evaluates its options as the August deadline approaches, with an interim trade deal almost ruled out. Sources say India is considering all options, including the possible imposition of reciprocal tariffs. US Trade Representative hints at more negotiations. Indian oil refiner Nayara Energy, backed by Russia's Rosneft, takes Microsoft to court. This after Microsoft stopped services to the company following sanctions by the EU. Straight to the market action, the US and European markets edged higher after the two economies struck a trade agreement. Before we get to that, let's see the Asian markets and how they fared. The Indian benchmark indices ended near a two-month low following a sharp decline. Japan's Nikkei also closed in the red. Meanwhile, South Korea's Kospi, China's Shanghai Composite and Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index recorded minor gains. After 4 months of negotiations, the US and Europe have agreed on a trade deal. US will impose a 15% tariff instead of the 30% proposed earlier. Auto tariffs have also been reduced from 25% to 15%, while steel and aluminium tariffs will continue at 50%. The European Union has also agreed to buy energy products worth $750 billion from US and invest additional $600 billion in the country. Business leaders in Europe criticized the deal. However, European Commission's President Ursula von der Leyen said this is the best deal they could get.
We have good news. We've reached a deal. It's a good deal for everybody, I believe. And I think you were saying this is probably the biggest deal ever reached in any capacity, trade or beyond trade.
It is.
It's a giant deal with lots of countries, because, as you know, Ursula represents a lot of countries, not one country. It's not easy for you. It's because a lot of very different countries, great countries, but some are strong with cars, some are strong with agriculture, some are strong with both, right?
15% is not to be underestimated, but it is the best we could get. It's overall across the board. Important was for us, it includes not only the cars, so go down with the tariffs for cars to 15%, but also all goods and semiconductor and pharma.
US President Donald Trump has said that he will likely implement a blanket tariff between 15% and 20% on imports to the United States from countries that have not negotiated separate trade agreements. So far, Japan, EU, China, Vietnam, Indonesia and Philippines are among countries that have managed to secure trade deals with the US. The tariff range for them is 10 to 30%. However, several South Asian countries, including India and South Korea, are yet to clinch a deal with just days to go before the August 1st deadline. Trump had earlier proposed tariff rates in the range of 25 to 36% for these countries. Sources tell us that there have been no signs of a breakthrough on India-US trade talks yet. US wants India to commit to big-ticket purchases and investments. It also wants zero-duty access, just like with Japan, Vietnam and Indonesia. Sources say India is considering all options, including the possible imposition of reciprocal tariffs. Both sides hope to find consensus on a full agreement by fall. US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has said that the Washington's August deadline for imposing tariffs will not be extended. So how will the tariffs impact India and other nations? Joining us now to discuss this is Mark Linscott, Senior Advisor at US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. He has served as the Assistant USTR in the past. Thank you very much for being with us, Mark. Let me begin by asking you, from your experience as a trade negotiator, is there now any likelihood of having an interim deal before the 1st of August? You literally have 2 or 3 days to go. Trade negotiations are complex. You've already done 5 rounds. The negotiators came back to India on the 19th of July. Can anything be done in the next 2 days?
Well, first of all, it's great to see you, Parikshit. I certainly hope to see a deal. I'd like to see a deal. We do only have a few days, but I've stopped making predictions. I thought several weeks ago that we would have a deal between the United States and India in place. The negotiators have done the hard work. That's clear to me. We've got members of the cabinet on both sides that have been involved. Howard Lutnick, Jameson Greer on the U.S. side, and Minister Goyal on the Indian side. I think what is needed at this point in time is for the two leaders, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, to touch base. And I think if that happened, there would be very good prospects to reach a deal this week.
Right. You know, the countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, even European Union have reached a deal with the US. Does India stand to lose if we don't get a deal by the 1st of August?
I think so. We are seeing the Trump trade policy in full flower now. It's a trade policy of chaos, of uncertainty, of arrogance, of aggression, and I'm quite confident that it will move forward and impose reciprocal tariffs on August 1st. I don't think we'll have broad-based extensions again, and as you noted, Howard Lutnick made that clear. So if India does not strike a deal at this point in time, it will have a comparative tariff that is higher than many others who have struck deals. And in particular, Japan and the EU just yesterday at 15%.
Right. What do you think is the concession that the US is looking for? We've been told by the Indian side that agriculture and dairy is not even on the table anymore. But what is Donald Trump looking for? And should we be making that concession for the US?
Yeah, well, President Trump is trade negotiator in chief. He's made that very clear. Each of these deals have involved some level of his engagement with other leaders or even with a minister in the situation of Japan. I think that's what we need to see. He certainly will be seeking those headline announcements of big deals of energy purchases to come, military purchases to come. And I think India could probably cobble together something like that that includes a big number. So that's probably what is needed. But most importantly, it's that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump can engage this week. I think that is the missing component at this point in time.
Right. You know, when Donald Trump is seeking these big headline announcements, the fact is, how do you follow through, implement such deals and commitments? For example, Japan is saying $550 billion, and that country is going through a political change right now. How does one expect to implement and deliver on such deals?
Yeah, in fact, many of us former trade negotiators and U.S. trade negotiators have been scratching our heads about this over the last couple of weeks. These aren't commitments normally made in trade agreements. Maybe many of these commitments are not yet in writing. We haven't seen agreement texts released, so we can assess exactly what is intended. I see some of these statements of hundreds of billions of dollars that will be invested or will be purchased as essentially best efforts, intentions on the part of the two countries. I'm not sure that they will ever be legally binding. I don't know how much government intervention will be in the mix here. I think they are aspirations as opposed to hardcore commitments. I think India could be able to provide that kind of component, just as the EU has, just as Japan has.
Right. Mark, just to understand from you, from your experience, what could India get in terms of tariffs on the 1st of August? I'm going by Donald Trump's latest statements, which have been made in the presence of Prime Minister Starmer in Scotland, where he says that the tariffs on countries which have not yet reached a deal or negotiated a deal with the US could be in the range of 15 to 20%. He has also threatened pharma tariffs. He has also threatened countries which are part of BRICS with an additional 10% tariff. So what could India actually get, realistically be looking at, if we don't have a deal?
Well, I haven't seen those comments made in the press conference with Prime Minister Starmer and President Trump, so I really can't comment on that. We've been anticipating several scenarios. One in which there's a deal, and right now the blueprint for that appears that it could be 15%. I think very close to what the negotiators accomplished a couple of weeks ago. It could be the reciprocal tariff that was announced on April 2nd. That's 26%. It could be higher if the president feels that a country has not been negotiating in good faith, and I certainly don't think that's the situation with India. But if the president makes that kind of assessment, we could see higher rates. I expect Brazil is going to face a 50%. I expect South Africa will face a 30%. But for the moment, it appears that the range for India could be anywhere from 26% down to about 15%.
Right, anywhere between 15 and 26%. And what if India were to wait it out? If we don't give in, and Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal has said this on 2-3 occasions, while it will be good, and I'm quoting him from a statement he made on Sunday, while it will be good if we have a trade deal by the 1st of August, we also have to look at our national interest. Now, how would you interpret this statement? And if India were to wait it out after the 1st of August, how would things pan out? How bad could it really be?
Well, I think the best case scenario, at least the least worst scenario, is to strike a deal this week. That's what the president is looking for. That's the best way to avoid reciprocal tariffs. If a deal is not struck, the two sides, I think, will continue to work together in trade negotiations. The larger aspiration is for a bilateral trade agreement. That was never going to be done by August 1st. In fact, those negotiations for the larger agreement will probably take most of 2025 and leak into 2026. So I don't think it will be the end of the world. I don't think it will be a collapse of negotiations if the reciprocal tariff comes into place. But I still think that the best case scenario is to get a deal now and then build on that in the future BTA negotiations.
Right. And finally, when we speak about a larger headline deal with investment announcements and big ticket purchases, India is already looking at major defense and energy purchases from the US. According to you, what do you think would be some of those big announcements that Donald Trump would be looking at? Because what we also hear is that currently he doesn't think there is too much ambition in the deal. So if there were certain big numbers, big announcements from the India side, what could those possibly be and in which direction?
I think certainly big numbers, as you suggest, meaning hundreds of billions of dollars. That's what he's been touting with other trading partners, yesterday with the European Union, last week with Japan. He wants numbers in that range. Energy purchases and defense purchases are central to that. Perhaps that would be sufficient with respect to India, and probably some kind of indication that there will be an effort to wean Indian purchases of oil from Russia. And that does seem to be part of the equation as well. But I'm confident that that can be done, and it would grease the wheels for an agreement this week.
All right. Thank you very much for those important messages. Mark Linscott, former Assistant USTR. He was there in the former Trump administration. He was part of the mini trade deal negotiations and also senior advisor at USISPF. Thank you very much, Mark, for being with us.
Thanks, Parikshit.
A quick look now at the other headlines from around the world. Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in their border conflict. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim has said both sides have reached a common understanding to take steps to return to normalcy. The leaders of Thailand and Cambodia hailed the outcome of the meeting and shook hands at the conclusion of the brief press conference. This comes after 5 days of fighting along the disputed border. At least 4 people died in China after swollen rivers triggered severe flooding and landslides in the country. According to the government, 41 rivers have breached warning levels and prompted fresh alerts from smaller water bodies and mountain streams. Authorities have warned of more intense rainfall and rising disaster risks in the coming days. US President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Starmer met in Scotland's Turnberry. The two leaders met at Trump's golf resort on the third full day of the US president's private visit to Scotland. Speaking before the meeting, Trump said that the US will be announcing pharma tariffs in the very near future. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has said that the company has signed a deal with Samsung to source chips. The deal will be worth $16.5 billion. In a post on X, Musk said Samsung's new fabrication unit in Texas will be dedicated to making Tesla's next-generation AI6 chip. He added that the $16.5 billion numbers is just a bare minimum and the actual output is likely to be much higher. Alibaba has unveiled a pair of smart glasses powered by its artificial intelligence models, marking the Chinese firm's first foray into the product category. The e-commerce giant said the Quark AI glasses will be launched in China by the end of 2025, competing with Meta's Ray-Ban collaboration. The smart glasses offer features like hands-free calling and real-time language translation, among others. Time for a short break, but don't go anywhere. US and China have resumed talks for an extension to the trade war truce between the two nations. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and China's Vice Premier will meet in Sweden's Stockholm to restart talks. Welcome back to Global Lens. US and China resume talks as the 90-day truce expiry period comes to an end. The meeting, which is held in Sweden, is aiming for truce extensions by 3 months. Now, the current truce period ends on the 12th of August. This is the third time that US and Chinese officials are meeting since the US President Donald Trump raised tariffs for China. This meeting comes at a time when US is busy holding talks with multiple nations to strike a deal before the 1st of August deadline, a deadline which has kept many nations on alert, mostly those that haven't struck a deal other than China. The other Asian countries that haven't reached a deal with the US includes India, South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, Bangladesh, Cambodia. We're joined by Victor Gao of Center for China and Globalization to understand more on US-China trade talks. How hopeful are you, Victor Gao, of an extension of the truce by another 90 days?
I personally hope something will be reached in Stockholm between China and the United States. After all, by now, China and the United States have known each other's bottom line very well, and their differences have been narrowed down again and again, and I think they are very close to reaching a deal. Now, on the other hand, the United States has brought in many other extraneous things. For example, now they call for removal of all the restrictions on the export control for the rare earth, but China insists that if the rare earth will be used for civilian use, they will be very flexible. But if the rare earth will be used for military use, China will impose very strict restriction. More recently, the United States has also demanded that countries like China and India and others should not buy oil or gas from Russia or from Iran. Otherwise, the United States threatens to impose up to about 500% tariff on their exports to the United States. Therefore, China is very clear about its bottom line. China wants to discuss and negotiate a deal with the United States. But if the United States chooses to fight the tariff war against China, China will fight to the very end. So let's hope sanity will prevail in Stockholm and China and the United States will reach a deal.
Right. Are you saying that China is not only looking for assurances that tariffs on Chinese products will not be imposed, but also these indirect sanctions in the form of 500% tariffs on countries buying Russian oil, then a 10% additional tariffs on BRICS nations, irrespective of who they are. These are being considered as informal sanctions in China. Is there going to be a discussion on these as well?
I do not know what the American side will really be up to in Stockholm. I think the United States by today has fully revealed its true color. That is, they are weaponizing tariff. They do not want to achieve their goal only through tariff. They want to use tariff as an instrument to achieve other goals. For example, they are not really serious about moving manufacturing jobs back to the United States. They want to use tariff and weaponize it to achieve other goals, including their geopolitical goals. Now, China has made it very clear. China is fully prepared to fight the tariff war with the United States till the very end. Let me explain it for your benefit. I think if the United States chooses to impose more and more tariffs against China, China will reciprocate. China will fight back. And by the end of the day, if China and the United States follow that line of thinking, the two-way trade in goods will need to wind down to zero. It's winding down to a complete halt. Right. Now, China will be ready to suffer all the costs. Whether the United States is really ready to suffer all those costs, losing out on the China market, that's another thing. That's right. Why I urge people in Washington to use their brain, to use their sanity, and to avoid weaponizing tariff for what goal, what purpose? No useful and constructive purpose at all.
Right. Mr. Gao, now these talks between US and China are taking place in the backdrop of the US being successful in striking deals with European Union, Vietnam, Indonesia, Japan, and that too on its own terms. It has got unprecedented commitments of investments also from Japan and Indonesia for that matter. Now, does that put China in some sort of pressure to come to an agreement with the United States?
Absolutely not. No one has really seen the so-called agreements between the United States or Japan, and the Japanese leadership has denied that they reached the deal as described by Trump or his associates in Washington. And for other deals, for example, Vietnam has different explanations, and no one has produced the real documents about the deal between the United States and Vietnam. Now, on a higher level of analysis, if the United States, being the superpower in the world, holds a gun at the head of any country, that country will really suffer a lot of pressure. It's not surprising, because holding a gun by the United States at the head of any country, big or small, is in itself not the right thing to do to start with. What the United States is doing is really throwing a big wedge into free trade. Now, destroying free trade is not in anyone's interest. It's not in China's interest. It's not in India's interest. And it's also against the fundamental interest of the American people.
Mr. Gao, my final question
is to defend free trade.
Right. Mr. Gao, my final question would be, how do you think these US-China talks, depending on the outcome, how will they impact India-China trade relations in the next few months?
Well, I personally hope China and India will get along with each other, respecting each other. After all, we are very large populations, each with a population of 1.4 billion. And I have always advocated for closer economic cooperation between China and India. And if China and India can really put our heads together, there are so many things that China and India can really cooperate to achieve. By today, the size of the Chinese economy is about 5 times as big as India, and China is very sophisticated and highly industrialized compared with India. That means China can really offer a lot to India in achieving a higher level of modernization and industrialization, improving the quality of their manufacturing sector by a big margin in India. And cooperation will be the better way for China and India. And I hope not only in the coming days or weeks, or in the coming years and coming decades, China and India can decide to cooperate with each other rather than otherwise.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us today, Victor Gao. Let's get you some trending stories from around the world. 19-year-old Divya Deshmukh has won the 2025 Women's World Cup in Georgia. Deshmukh beat veteran Grandmaster Kuneru Hampi in the second rapid tie-break with the black pieces. With this, the teenager has etched her name in history as India's 88th Grandmaster and only the 4th Indian woman to achieve the prestigious title. England retains their crown as champions of Europe after beating Spain in penalty shootouts in Women's European Championship finals. It was Chloe Kelly that scored the winning goal for England. Marvel's The Fantastic Four: First Steps, directed by Matt Shackman, opened to an impressive $218 million worldwide over the weekend. It raked in $118 million from sales in the US and $100 million internationally. Meanwhile, Superman and F1 crossed the $500 million mark globally. On Final Cut this evening, over 115 people, mostly children, have starved to death since the ongoing conflict between Israel and Hamas. And these deaths have led to international outrage, even questioning the conduct of Israel in this war. United Nations warns this number is set to rise further if more aid does not reach Gaza on time. Before we wrap, we leave you with these visuals from Gaza.